Tonight on Need to Know, it's described by some as the common cold of sexually transmitted diseases, and yet it can impact women and men in ways you may not realize. Why we need to talk about HPV and what can be done to reduce your risk of getting it. That's next. Also on the show, the rise of movements such as Me Too and Time's Up have helped shift the way theater productions and films approach intimate scenes. We'll introduce you to the world of intimacy choreography in our region later on the show. And we'll meet a group of young explorers in Rochester, learning how to use the great outdoors to make important discoveries. Don't go anywhere. An all-new Need to Know starts right now. About 1 in 4 Americans is infected with the human papillomavirus, often referred to as HPV. That's according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. HPV happens to be the most common sexually transmitted infection in humans, and yet many Americans don't understand the severity of this type of infection. The CDC says that each year more than 42,000 HPV-associated cancers occur. The infection impacts women and men of all backgrounds. The Center for Community Health and Prevention at the University of Rochester Medical Center is hosting a viewing next month of the documentary film, Someone You Love, the HPV Epidemic. The screening will be followed by a panel discussion. The event is an effort to educate and enlighten our local community on HPV, in particular, its impact on cervical cancer. Joining me to begin this conversation prior to the May screening is Dr. Stanley Schaefer, Associate Professor in the Department of Pediatrics and at the Center for Community Health and Prevention at URMC. And Jason Coleman, Senior Manager of State and Primary Care Systems for the American Cancer Society of Rochester. And welcome to you both. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
So the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says that nearly all men and women, nearly all, will at some point get HPV in their lives. And I want to know, how is it that this virus can spread so easily? Dr. Schaefer, I'll start with you.
Well, you know, it is a virus that's very common, and particularly among young people, young adults. And in fact, you know, we're talking about approximately 1 out of every 4 people in the United States is infected with the HPV virus, about 79 or 80 million people. For most people, that viral infection will pass and will not cause any problems, but there's a small group in which the infection eventually will cause precancerous changes in the mucosa and eventually can cause different kinds of cancer. So prevention is really the key. That's what we really want to emphasize the most.
So in terms of, I guess how quickly can HPV spread? Is this something, and then how often do you see? Is it something that can be dormant for a period of time and pop up later? Is it something that relatively after intercourse you will notice that you have?
It's a silent infection, so you don't know that you have it. In the vast majority of cases. And it can be dormant for many, many years. So that is part of the problem. People aren't aware of it. They very well may have been infected and may have the virus for a number of years before it goes away or the changes occur. So again, prevention is where we want to put the most emphasis.
Right, and so in terms of prevention, let's talk a little bit about that. What does that look like?
So we have a goal of increasing vaccination rates to upwards of 80% by the year 2026. And that goal currently stands, we're at about 60% locally, but nationally closer to 50%. So we've got a long way to go. The target range for that vaccination is 11 and 12-year-olds. And quite frankly, it has nothing to do with sex. We don't want parents to think that when their pediatrician brings it up that it's a sexual conversation. It's really a cancer prevention conversation. The body responds the best at that target age range. So the goal is to complete the series by the 13th birthday. So we have the ability to prevent 6 common types of cancer through vaccination. And unfortunately, there's a lot of parents out there that aren't taking advantage of this modern day opportunity to prevent cancer in a generation of adolescents.
Why do you think that parents aren't jumping on board with this?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. Vaccines are heavily in the news these days. There's a large segment with a loud voice on social media with regard to vaccination. We want to encourage parents to seek out credible sources of information to make an informed decision for the health of their child. And that conversation begins with their pediatrician's office. The CDC has a great website, the cdc.gov. The American Cancer Society has great information at cancer.org, where parents can go to get information so that they're prepared to go into their pediatrician's office and ask the right questions. They're there anyway getting other vaccinations, so it's just a matter of preparing them with literacy around this issue, asking the right questions, and then getting the HPV vaccine at the same time their child's receiving other vaccinations.
So we'll revisit the prevention aspect in just a moment. But in terms of signs and symptoms of HPV, Dr. Schaefer, you said that this is a silent thing. So I guess, what are we looking for? What can we look for to know if there is an issue?
Well, there's really very little you can do. In adult women, they can get their pap smears, and that's very important. But short of that, there's very little that they can do. When people go to the dentist, a dentist may notice some precancerous lesions in the mouth, for instance, and usually that's due to HPV-related infections. So, there are things like that. But again, you don't want to wait until you have an infection to deal with the problem, because there's not much we can do once you have the infection to rid the body of it. So we want to prevent it as much as possible.
Well, in the documentary Someone You Love, the HPV Epidemic, which will be screening at the Little Theater on May 2nd, the film takes audiences inside the lives of 5 women affected by HPV. One of those women is Kelly, and I'd like us to take a closer look at Kelly's story.
Kelly Pizzoli is a school teacher who is newly married to an officer in the U.S. Army. She was excited about her future until she was suddenly given a shock of a lifetime.
2.5 months ago, I had plans, and I was, moving back to St. Louis temporarily, for the holidays, to spend with my family, and then off to Chicago. I was going to coach trapeze again. And I was going to be living in a city that I love with the friends that I love. Literally 5 days before I was moving back to Chicago, I found out that I might have cancer. And so I didn't go to Chicago. I'm 31, living at home again with my dad. It's surreal. Now that I'm starting to not feel as wonderful, he's been really great. He does so much for me.
She helps more than I help her. It's all her. It's all gymnastics champions.
I was a really athletic kid, and I played volleyball and softball and basketball, and I was always a gymnast, and I was a swimmer for a while.
She never had dreams of the Olympics. It was just fun. She loved doing it. She really did. She was good too. I shouldn't brag, but she was good, obviously. I was there too on 3 or 4 nights a week sometimes. Right after school, she'd come home, do her homework, get ready, we'd go to the gym, stay there for 3 or 4 hours.
In 2005, I got into trapeze, and I love it. And that's what I want to be doing right now. I don't know that I'll ever live in Chicago again, and I don't know that I'll have the opportunity to coach trapeze I was getting my pap smears regularly. I had had a doctor inside me with a speculum 3 times in the year preceding my diagnosis, and she didn't see it. It's scary. I was doing all the right things, and I was, going to the doctor as I should and getting all the screenings and doing all of that to the T. And then all of a sudden I have a 4.6 centimeter tumor hanging into my vagina. And yeah, okay, I have HPV, but that's gonna go away. Because I had cleared it once before. It was back, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna clear it like I did before. And then I went in for a follow-up, and it wasn't okay.
She knows everything about what's wrong with her. She speaks to the doctors on a one-on-one basis. She knows the terminology.
Unfortunately, in Kelly's case, it appears to be aggressive and rapidly growing just based on what we're seeing. Apparently it was not there 3 months ago, now it is.
It doesn't make any sense. I was literally laying on the table flabbergasted when this doctor said that she saw a mass on my cervix. What? No, there's no way. It's not cancer because cancer doesn't grow that fast. Well, it was cancer.
How common is Kelly's story? She said she had, been to the OBGYN, regularly tested for, got her pap smears, and yet she was totally shocked when she found out about cancer. Is that something that is typical? Her story? Is it more of a rarity?
Unfortunately, that's very common as a presentation of cervical cancer or vaginal or vulvar cancer in women. Again, this is a cancer that seems to target young adult women in particular, and so those are the people that we really want to focus on the most. Again, getting pap smears are very important for young women. So yes, that is the group.
So in terms of prevention, it sounds like, I guess, when should women begin screening for this? When do we start testing for this?
So pap smears are recommended to begin at age 21. When women turn 30, they're encouraged to get co-testing. At that age, they'll begin testing for the HPV virus with the same sample they would gather for their pap smear. So it's a very simple request, but we encourage women to ask for that co-testing beginning at age 30.
And then in terms of the vaccine, I want to go back to that. At what point, you mentioned 11, 12, this is when young people should be getting this vaccine. At what point do we age out of getting it? Is there a point when you're just too old?
So initially the indication for the vaccine was as young as age 9 and up through age 26. Recently that has been increased to age 45. But we still encourage the body responds much better at a younger age before exposure takes place.
Are there other myths and misconceptions in relation to HPV that might be causing people not to get testing, that might be causing people not to get the vaccine that you want to address and that you think people should be aware of?
So there's another story in the movie that I think is very compelling, and that's the story of a patient named Susie. And Susie was abstinent until she was married. And she hadn't been vaccinated. She was exposed to HPV with her very first partner. So for the parents that say, my child doesn't need that vaccine because they're not active, that's not the rationale to take. You need to look at this as pure and simple cancer prevention. We have the ability to prevent cancer through vaccination, targeting them before age 13 in a 2-shot series to prevent stories like Kelly's and Susie's and Tamika's. It's a very simple step that parents can do today, and we encourage them all to take advantage of that opportunity.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. We will close for now, but a special thank you to my guests for really breaking down this issue for us. Please be sure to save the date for the screening of the documentary film, Someone You Love, the HPV Epidemic, plus the panel discussion following that film. It's taking place on Thursday, May 2nd from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Little Theater. The event is brought to you by the Center for Community Health and Prevention at the University of Rochester Medical Center. To register for the event, go to lecture.urmc.edu/HPV. Intimate scenes on stage and in films can be vulnerable and scary for actors to perform. But now there is an emerging profession that ensures safety, efficiency, and effectiveness when it comes to those intimate moments. Intimacy directors and choreographers are on the rise, in part due to movements such as Me Too and Time's Up, in addition to the downfall of former Hollywood heavyweights Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, and others. Joining me to share more about the world of intimacy choreography and its relevance in our society is Jace Meyer Crosby, theater director, actor, and intimacy director. Jace is joined by Ralph Moranto, artistic director of JCC Center Stage, and Lindsay Warren Baker, a playwright, composer, and teaching artist. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So just to begin, Jace, I'm telling you right now, people are like, what is this intimacy choreography thing? So break it down. What exactly do intimacy professionals do?
Yes, so intimacy direction is sort of what we call it for the stage. The film and TV counterpart would be intimacy coordination. And the premise is basically that, similar to the way violence and stunts get choreographed and coordinated on a film set or in a theatrical production, that the same attention should be given to intimate scenes involving very close proximity, emotional intensity, very often sexuality on stage, that these things need to be handled with consent at the forefront and with a lot of pre-planning so that sexual harassment doesn't actually accidentally occur, and so that the story comes through as effectively as possible.
So as theater artists at this table, have you, and producers and directors, have you ever been in a situation where you would say, wow, we need an intimacy professional, but it didn't exist at the time, this profession wasn't around, and you had to forge ahead with something, and it might have been uncomfortable or a challenging thing?
I think for me, the most challenging moment was actually when I was in school. And, you know, oftentimes as theater students were left to our own devices saying, here, give this scene, direct this scene, act in this scene, and you get together with your friends and classmates to do that. And you're given challenging material, as well you should be. Mm-hmm. But particularly back at the time, over 10 years ago, when I was going through some of this stuff, I was given a challenging scene that was dealing with, you know, very serious sexual content and touch. And so we had to navigate that on our own because it was left up to us to figure that out. And so now that I know more, now that I know that this even exists, there's training for it, there are people out there to collaborate with, I think back like, oh, that needs to be a part of the education, that needs to be a part of the training. And Jace and I are talking about how I can incorporate some of that into my own classroom now, in addition to the work that we've done together, you know, as a director, intimacy director, collaboration on shows.
And for me, directing and being a performer in Rochester for years now, I never even thought that this was a profession that could be out there. I figured as a director that was my job to make that happen. But I didn't have official training or formal training in that, so I was just using my instincts as I do as a director. And once I learned this was something that I could take advantage of, it was just like fight choreography, something that just opened my eyes to say, we can do it in a safe way, we can do it in a way that's going to be even more effective than if we just try to figure it out ourselves. Mm-hmm. So it's just been an eye-opening experience for us at the JCC Theater.
Well, I want our audience to be able to see exactly what we're talking about. So we do have some scenes. Jace, you choreographed these scenes, and this is for the latest production at the JCC Center Stage in Decent. You directed this, you produced this. So let's take a look at this, and while we're watching, I would, if you would, comment a bit and explain kind of what you choreographed and what the thinking that went into what you created that we're seeing.
Great. So the process tends to differ depending on the director that you're working with, and Lindsay and I had a really great collaborative relationship in which she would start with the text. She would say, this is where a kiss takes place. She would say, this is where you know, she touches her breasts, because they talk about that later. And then I would come in and I would give a sort of, we'd have a boundaries conversation, we'd have a comfort level conversation, and then we would go through very mechanically a choreographic process so that the actors are never surprised on stage, so that you can see the level of emotion they're bringing to this. The reason they're able to sink into it like that is because they know exactly what's going to happen to their body in the next moment. They can just completely, like their reactions are everything. They sell that story because they feel safe and because they know that nothing's going to happen that's going to take them off guard in the moment, because it's choreographed. And the argument is always, well, if we choreograph it, it won't look real. It won't look authentic. Which is a sort of an argument that I understand. It sounds logical. Choreography, we think of fake, we think of pre-planned, we think of inauthentic. But the reality is, creativity and art comes from freedom within boundaries. If you have unlimited freedom, you're paralyzed. You don't know where to begin. I heard someone say an artist in front of a blank canvas is paralyzed. It's not until you constrain yourself to say, I'm going to paint a landscape, or I'm going to paint a tree, that you can really make beautiful things happen. And so when we constrain it and say, we're going to have your hand placed at exactly this point, and then we're going to have it travel from here to here, then once we have that framework in place, they can really let themselves go and get really emotional scenes like Sarah Michelle Penner and Maya Dwyer brought to that scene in Indecent.
So Lindsay and Ralph, talk to me. When Jace comes in and does his work, what type of reaction are you getting from your performers? What type of feedback are you getting in terms of the impact?
So I've worked on 2 shows with Jace so far, and for everyone, it's not just for us as directors that this is a new field. For the actors, it's a new field. And so to a certain extent, whoever you're working with as a director is responsible for setting up the environment in which you're collaborating and creating that safety and that I don't know, collaborative environment. But it's also contingent upon the actors to figure out how to relate to each other and how to be okay in that kind of physical contact. So by working with Jace, it becomes very clear about what the boundaries are, how we interact with each other, what is an acceptable progression from point A to point B to point C in terms of, you start creating a shape, and then you add the next detail, and then you add the next detail. So kisses, actual mouth-to-mouth kissing isn't happening until well into the process, right? And for them, what was interesting, this latest project for both, I think, Sarah and Maya was saying this is so different and so new. Like, they're not used to waiting to go to that step.
Or some people do the opposite, where they'll
Right.
save it until like dress rehearsal
Right.
because they're uncomfortable and don't know how to handle it.
Yeah, so it depends on the actor and what has been quote unquote expected of them, or how they think they're supposed to behave, or what they're supposed to do, or how they can show that they are totally comfortable or not. So this was wonderful because it just provided an understanding and a vocabulary and a way in which to communicate to ultimately create a really multiple beautiful scenes, not only between the two of them, but between the whole company. There was a moment where we were going along and it was working and everyone was doing pretty well, and then it was also, we were just getting stuck, as a group. And Maya's like, I think we need Jace. I said, I think you're right.
And I hate we've got about 30 seconds left, but this was so effective that you're continuing to work with Jace in the next production.
Yeah, I'm planning my seasons going, okay, where do I need Jace? We're right now working on Oklahoma, which has a surprising amount of intimate moments between the characters. And I said, I definitely need Jace, and it's really been elevating the production to a whole new level.
All right, well, we are out of time, but a huge thank you to Jace Meyer Crosby, Ralph Moranto, and Lindsay Warren Baker for joining me today and for explaining really in greater depth why the performing arts world and our community, all the way to Hollywood, needs intimacy professionals. To learn more about Jace's work, go to jcmeyercrosby.com, and you can also get more info through Intimacy Directors International at teamidi.org. Well, spring is finally here, and that means people throughout Rochester are eager to head outside and embrace the slightly warmer temperatures. But once you finally get outside, do you ever stop to take the time and notice the environment around you? Well, the City of Rochester's Department of Youth and Recreation has created a group called Earth Explorers. The goal is to get kids to enjoy the great outdoors while taking part in a little something called citizen science. WXXI's Lisa Famiglietti reports.
Oh, look at that. And what, do you know what that word is?
It's a cool spring day in April, and the City of Rochester's Department of Recreation and Youth Services program, called Earth Explorers, is ready to go outside and take part in citizen science, especially its newest member, Isabella.
Citizen science is when regular people like us can do science, like the real scientists, so we can observe just like them.
And that is exactly what this group of young Earth Explorers will be doing over the next few months. Today, they had booklets with questions to help them better observe the space around them. One question was, what do you see? While another question was, what do you hear? These simple observations are helping students explore their environment. The Department of Recreation and Youth Services Commissioner, Dr. Danielle Lyman-Torres, talks about the importance of the Earth Explorers program and some of the benefits of bringing students back to nature.
Programs like the Earth Explorers are very important to any community, but in particular to communities where equity and access to nature are not there. So the youth in our community really struggle with access to nature and to being in nature on a regular basis. And research has shown the benefits to health outcomes, academic outcomes, to being connected to nature. And so we really are trying to break down the barriers of staying in an urban environment, staying in the urban core, and getting out and exploring our beautiful park system.
Stephanie Benway of the City of Rochester's Department of Recreation and Youth Services says that the Earth Explorers program not only teaches kids about the environment, but why their choices matter.
We offer opportunities for them to explore the natural wonders of the world around them by doing hands-on activities and experiments in the classroom, as well as teaching them how to grow their own food in our on-site gardens, and then taking them on field trips to our city's wonderful parks and other natural areas. The Earth Explorers program doesn't just teach them about the environment, it teaches them why we should care and what we can do, why our choices matter.
But you don't need to be a student to take part in citizen science.
Citizen science is a way for any and everyone to get out and participate in scientific research by offering a platform for people to record their observations in nature. Not only does this help scientists actually solve problems, but it offers people a way to engage with their communities and their environments and make meaningful contributions.
And as for Isabella, she is already doing her part by making sure people know how they can help plants and trees.
Well, we can replant them. If they can't do it by themselves, we can make sure people don't cut down trees and plants, and people don't kill the flowers.
Tune in to PBS Nature American Spring Live on Monday, April 29th through Wednesday, May 1st at 8 p.m. That's on WXXI TV. And for more information about citizen science and American Spring Live, visit wxxi.org/citizenscience. Major support for Nature American Spring Live was provided by the National Science Foundation and Anne Ray Foundation. Local support has been provided by Cobblestone Capital Advisors. And that wraps up another edition of Need to Know, Rochester's news magazine. I'm your host, Helene Bianduti-Hofer. Thank you for joining me tonight, throughout the weekend, and online at WXXInews.org. Have a great night.